These are texts that we sometimes read or sometimes don't always take the time to dig in, but today we are digging in and making sure we understand the totality of the text. And so we're going to dive into a little bit of Amos and learn a little bit about him. Let's get ready to go to the text. I'm going to start us out with Amos. It's an Old Testament, 5th chapter, verses 21 through 24. And then I'm going to jump to the 7th chapter. We're going to read verses 14 through 15. So let's go ahead and stand together on this one. Amos, the 5th chapter, and verses 21 through 24. And the text says, I despise your religious feasts. I cannot stand your assemblies. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, God says, I cannot accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs, I will not listen to the music of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, righteousness like a never-failing stream. That's Amos 5:21 through 24. I jump just a little bit over to the 7th chapter, verse 14. We'll read 14 and 15. Amos 7, verses 14 through 15. It says, Then Amos answered and said to Amaziah, I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I was a shepherd, and I also took care of a sycamore fig trees. But the Lord took me from tending the flock and said to me, Go prophesy to my people Israel. Okay, y'all can sit down. This morning, I want to lean into this whole idea of justice is your job description. We're talking about Amos, and the title I want to kick it with a little bit today is called Justice is Your Job Description. It's your job description. Let's look a little bit at this. It just says over here, so in Amos, the 7th chapter, 5th chapter, the 7th verse, we read about the minor prophets. And one thing we're trying to learn and understand is when we're talking about the minor prophets, often they don't get all the play and all the talk about because they're not always the text that people lead to initially. But it's summertime, and we want to make sure we understand the totality of the text. Last week we talked about Hosea and the work of Hosea and what Hosea did in ministry. But this week I want to lean into Amos and I want to teach a little bit. And so let's talk a little bit about this just for a moment. I've learned that God doesn't always call what we consider the qualified. I've learned that God will qualify what we call. And God can call whomever he wants to call when he wants to call them, no matter our background, no matter our mistakes, no matter our challenges, no matter where life has taken us. God can call who he wants to call, and he will qualify them. And there's nothing we can do to call ourselves qualified. It's God who does it. And so we can think about folk like Rosa Parks. Y'all know Rosa Parks. I'll take us back just a little bit. In Montgomery, Alabama, she wasn't a politician. She wasn't someone that was looking to be an activist. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't any of those things. She was just tired one day. She started her shift back in that December day, 1955, and just was tired. And that particular day, she just said, I'm tired and I'm not giving up my seat this morning. And in that moment, she was treated less than a human. And injustice, she just got tired of seeing it over and over again. And she decided, I'm just not getting up today. So that day she said, I'm going to stand for what's right. Justice. Somebody shout justice. And so she stood up for justice. And so our job title that we have, it does not determine the work of justice that we have. Amos, as you'll see, it was fighting for justice. Let me give you another example. We can go back in our history. We can talk about, y'all know the late, great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Y'all know he was a 26-year-old brother just trying to preach at his church on Dexter Avenue and then working on his seminary degree and dissertation. He's just trying to do the work of the Lord. But God said to him, he says, I need you to lead my people. I need you to lead this bus boycott. And here it is, Dr. King is saying, listen, I'm just trying to preach, and I'm just trying to do my job. I'm trying to get my degree. But here it is, God had other plans for him. And many of us, we have our experiences, whether we're entrepreneurs, whether we're educators, just everyday folk, just trying to do what we do. Here's the good news as we look at Amos's story and see how Amos's story connects to our story. And I'm talking about justice this morning because we all fight and stand up for justice, what is right. That is our responsibility as believers. And so I'm going to push you this morning, say that God is going to get ready to deputize you to do his work, because there's work that he's called you, me, us to do in this season, in this time. And so, and God needs all of us in our own space to speak truth to power.
That's right.
And so we're living in a time when we think about Amos's story, and we kind of connect it to our story, where sometimes when we're talking about justice, the work that Amos did, and we're talking about justice, the work that we also have to do. We're talking about justice. Some people think you got to be like a professional activist to fight and stand up for what's right. Like you need a nonprofit status to stand up and fight for what's right. A board of directors and all these other people to stand up for what's right. And God is looking for ordinary folk that will stand up for what's right. And here it is. We start to lean into this brother named Amos. He was a shepherd. And God called him from shepherding to, God says, I need you to go shake up the system. I need you to go speak for me and declare my word for me. I need you to pause on what you're doing. I need you to go confront the system. And so Amos wasn't on anybody's radar screen. He wasn't like a preacher that was trending on social media. He wasn't someone that came from prophetic kind of pedigree. He didn't have all this preaching training. He was none of that. He was from a small little town called Tekoa. And this was about 12 miles south of Jerusalem. And here it is, God called him from this small back town, if you will, to go to the city, to Jerusalem, to speak to the people, to tell them about what thus saith the Lord. Like God called somebody from the backwoods of some Mississippi city and said, listen, I need you to go to Wall Street, and I need you to speak to Wall Street and tell them about what's really going on. And God called Amos in this time. He says, I need you to go north to Israel and tell them about themselves. And so this is when Amos decided, I'm going to go open my mouth, and I'm going to tell them what the Lord says. And I'm not coming to play church. He says, I'm coming to challenge the system. And here comes Amos. Now, let's back into this. Now, last week I talked to you about Hosea. Now, Hosea went and preached to the people, and God used Hosea and his relationship with Gomer to talk about the infidelity, if you will, that Israel had with their relationship with him. And so now God is using Amos. And here's what is interesting, that he sent Amos to the northern kingdom just like he did with Hosea, and this was around the same time. So for my Bible study readers, because it's summertime, we make sure we understand the Bible, and we understand the minor prophets if you're just tuning in. And here it is around the same time, 760 BC or so, where King Jeroboam II is on the throne. I told you last week, I'll tell you again and remind you today that right now, things are going well for Israel. They are thriving. They are economically doing well. The the gross domestic product of the time is through the roof. Times are good. Times, they have times of plenty. The stock market of their time is making records, and things are going extremely well, financially that is. But here it is, God calls Amos. Now here I need you to understand that Amos and Hosea were ministering at around the same time. This is interesting. Now here it is, it's almost like Amos, if you will, is from he's kind of an outsider. He's not from the big city, but here it is, Hosea is from the region. So they're both preaching and they're both prophetically using their gift in a different message, but using their word at the similar time. And here it is, they're both going to tell Israel about themselves. And so they were doing the work of the Lord. And so Amos ministered mostly during that time of Jeroboam II. So my note takers, my Bible study readers, you should write that down. So as you're doing your Bible study, go back and understand more about the text. But although Amos and Hosea was preaching at the same time, they had different approaches. And while both condemned Israel's injustice and idolatry, their prophetic style was just a little bit different. Help me understand, Pastor. Amos focused primarily on kind of social justice and the economic depression, as we're going to talk about, the message that he was talking about, how wrong Israel was, not only because they turned their back on God, but also because they were violating God's covenant. And here it is, when you look at them and juxtapose Amos's ministry to Hosea's ministry, you see that Hosea God used him in this painful marriage that he had to an unfaithful wife named Gomer. And God was using his marriage, his life, as a metaphor between their relationship with God and this unfaithful Israel that we see moving in the text. And so here it is, they both were ministering at the same time, and all this was happening. But I have good news for God's people this morning, that God is always making a way for us to come back to him. Even when we make mistakes, even when we mess up, and we will mess up, God continues to make a way for us to come back to him. And so now, at this moment in time, God is sending Amos to say, I need you to tell my people how wrong they are. I need you to tell them they need to get themselves together, because what they're doing is wrong. Okay, write this down, my first principle. Your background doesn't disqualify you. Your background doesn't disqualify you for the breakthroughs that God wants to do in your life. Your background doesn't disqualify you. Okay, let's look at this. 7th chapter, 14th verse. We read that together. Amos responds when they try to shut him down. He goes to speaking. And remember what we're talking about. Amos is going to tell Israel, you're wrong. How are you doing the people? You're wrong. There is this stratified kind of society that we talked about last week, this gap between the rich and the poor. And the rich kept getting richer and the poor kept getting poorer. And the problem is not only that the society suggests that, but even the religious leaders of the time were taking advantage of the people. And so there was so much wrong going on in the city, so much wrong going on, that God says, I'm calling you, Amos, from this backwoods. I'm calling you from being a shepherd. I'm calling you from tending to fig trees. And I need you to stop that. And I need you to go, and I need you to go speak to the people about how wrong they are and get my people together, because I am calling them to make a turn and to change their ways. And so God calls Amos out of nowhere. And so Amos, he comes, he shows up. They try to shut him down. Look what Amos said. You read it with me. Let's read it. Look at it again in Amos 7, chapter 14, verse. He says this. He says, I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I was a shepherd. Again, he says, I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet. He says, but all I was a shepherd. He says, and I took care of sycamore fig trees. And so Amos, what I love about Amos is he owned his story. He didn't try to fake his credentials like he had it all together. He owned his story. He said, look, I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. I don't come from preaching pedigree. I'm not going to try to front. I'm not going to pad my resume to act like I have all this stuff together. He says, this is all I know is that God called me to do this. He's not trying to pretend to be something that he wasn't. He says to right up front, I was not the prophet or the son of a prophet. This is who I am. And he says, I'm going to train for this. I didn't go to school to be I didn't go to prophet school. He says, my daddy wasn't a prophet. He says, I'm just a shepherd trying to tend to some fig trees. That's all I am. But then he says, if you look at that text and you continue to read, he says, but the Lord took me. I was a shepherd tending to sheep. I was tending to fig trees and sycamore trees. He says, but the Lord took me. And what trips me out is he says, I didn't ask for this. God came and got me. God came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, I got work for you to do. I didn't sign up for this. I don't know nothing about being a prophet. I don't know nothing about preaching, none of that stuff. Nobody taught me none of any of this. All I know is the Lord took me. And I love that about God, that he can take any one of us from wherever we are. And you don't need to have been grown up with a silver spoon in your mouth and have all the preaching pedigree. All you know is that God has called you to ministry. God has called you to do some work for him. And whatever your calling is, you just got to walk out in your calling. And it can't be about this person seems like they know more than me, or that person knows more than me. If you know that God has called you to something, you just got to stand up and say, all I know is the Lord took me. That's right. All I know is he called me out of my mess. All I know is I once was lost, but now I'm found. Y'all know how I once was blind, but now I see. All I know is God called me to do something. I can't explain it the way I want to explain it, but he called me to this. And since he's called me to this, I got to do what he's called me to do. That's right. And so we find Amos saying, I'm just going to stand up and do what God has called me to do. He says, the Lord took me. He said, look, I came from a humble background, from a humble beginning. He says, but I understand this, I have a holy calling. So you might, like Amy said, I don't have maybe the pedigree of some other folk, but I know I got a purpose. I know God has called me to do something great. I might not have your credentials, but I know one thing, I got a calling on my life. I got some work that God has called me to do, and everybody's work is going to look different, but the thing is, we all got work to do. Everybody's message is going to look different, but we all got a message to preach. And you don't have to have a platform and be on a stage to have a message to preach. We all got a message to preach. We all got people that God has called us to. We all have a space that God has called us to stand up in and speak truth to power and to do the work of the Lord. And Amos says, but the Lord took me. And so many of us have that same testimony where God pulled us up and called us to do work, stuff that we didn't see ourselves doing, we never asked for, but now we find ourselves ministering to people and telling about the goodness of Jesus because the Lord took us just like he did for Amos. And so when we start to lean into this, we don't always look at how qualified we think we are, because we know that God can qualify the called. And so you could be at a place where you're saying, I feel like I'm overlooked. I don't have the credentials. I don't have the zip code that some people have, the education, the right connections. But when you're connected to God, God can cause you to do whatever needs to be done. And God will give you everything you need to make sure your purpose is achieved in life. God, it's not only in the text. We can look at so many examples in our own lives. We can look at examples historically. We can see how God has done this and how God will take people that seem to be the least likely, the least qualified, and use them. Okay, take us back, give us a little history lesson. Y'all know in our history we've got people like Sojourner Truth. Y'all know about her. She could not read or write, but she could preach. That's right. That's right. She stood up, and history will tell us she stood up in some of those abolition meetings, and she would tell them, she said, I ain't gonna fake it, I can't read or write, but she said, but I can read the truth. That's right, that's right. I know what the truth is. That's right. And when she spoke, some of the most eloquent, some of the most educated had to be quiet and just listen because her words had that much power. That's right. I'll say it again. God can qualify the call. We'll go a little bit further, Pastor. Let's take us back to memory lane and history lessons, show how God uses people that are least likely. He uses people like you and I. Y'all know people like Harriet Tubman. Y'all know her story. Didn't have military training. But yet, with no military training when we read about her story, she became this kind of conductor of this underground railroad that we call it now. It wasn't an underground railroad then. She was just trying to help people.
That's right. That's right.
And you know her story. Her story says she never lost a passenger. Never lost somebody. They called her the Black Moses. And she didn't earn a title through some university or college, but it was God who qualified her. It was God who called her. It was God who used her. And God can do the same thing for you and for me. And so sometimes we can find ourselves quiet for too long, thinking our voice doesn't matter because we don't have what other people have. But your voice matters. You have something to say. You have a word to preach. You got something to add. And so we got to stand up and understand that God can qualify me. I am qualified. I am called. And I am blessed. And I'm going to make a difference because God has already predestined that I will be what he's called me to be. And so you got work to do. Tell your neighbor quickly, you got work to do. You got work to do. You got work to do. Let's jump back to Amos 5 real quick. We're almost there. Amos 5. We're going to jump between Amos 5 and Amos 7 as we just read both of those scriptures together. And Amos 5 and verses 21 through 24, here's where it starts to get interesting because Amos, he might find himself getting in trouble with the people now because this is where he stops preaching and starts to meddle in their business. And the problem becomes this. Look what Amos says. He goes to them, he says, God has sent me to give you a message. If you read 5 and start at 21, he says some very interesting words. He says, I despise your religious feasts. I cannot stand your assemblies. Look at it, we read it together. When you look at the words, and you pull out those big words in there where God is speaking through Amos, Amos is prophetically talking to the people. God is saying, I despise your religious feasts. I cannot stand your assemblies. And so let that sink in for a second, because what Amos is essentially saying is, God is saying to them, I hate your church services. This is good. Can you imagine walking into the biggest church in the biggest city and walking up in there and say, look, I need to say something on the mic. Come take the mic, and this is what you say. God hates your worship service. Wow. First of all, you got to have some courage and some boldness to do that. But to stand in front of all these people, all this religious folk that's in here, all the people in this big church, and to stand up, and Amos did this on a national level, standing up to all of Israel saying, God says, I hate your church services. I don't know who feel like they can do that. But that's not an easy thing to do. He walked up into their most kind of sacred space and said, God says your worship is worthless. What y'all doing is worthless. Y'all just making a whole bunch of noise. And what I noticed is he didn't come talking about this message because and saying that worship service was off because the choir wasn't singing on the right key. It wasn't because the preacher wasn't, he wasn't bringing it home. It wasn't because the preaching was boring. It wasn't because of any of that. It wasn't because the offering wasn't bringing in what it should have. It wasn't because of any of those things. It's because God says, I'm rejecting your worship is because you have divorced yourself from justice. You have divorced yourself from doing the right thing. You aren't doing the right thing. And you're not living righteous before me. And so God says, I hate what y'all are doing. Y'all getting together doing all this stuff, but I'm not in it. It's a bad thing to gather and talk and say you're gathering for God, and God ain't in what you're gathering about. And how many people are getting together talking about God but ain't living about God? Talking and talk but ain't walking the walk. And here it is, Israel was talking and talking but wasn't walking the walk, and God sent Amos and said, y'all wrong. God said, Amos said, I'm going to walk up in here and I'm going to be bold in front of all of y'all, and I'm going to tell all of y'all. Now let me remind you, you got all these other people that have prophetic pedigree. They have, that's their space. You got all these other religious folk that have all these credentials, and here it is. Don't forget now that you have Amos that don't have any of that. And he walks up in there as bold as he can be and says, God don't like what y'all are doing. That's a big thing to do. And so this is when we fast forward and look at our modern day time, we can find people still getting together and they're organized and they're talking good, but they're not doing what they talk about. People can have all these fancy churches and sanctuaries, but they're not preaching and teaching and going out to the highways and byways and telling folk to come to Jesus Christ. And we need folk that will shine a light on some corruption and people doing the wrong things. It's people that have revivals, but don't even go to the right past people in the community that's struggling, that's homeless, that's on drugs, that are at their wits' end, and they ride right by them and say, we're going to have church service. Come on now. Instead of ministering to people, the real people that need Jesus, we ride by them and we say they should come to church. Well, sometimes the church should come to them. That's right. Sometimes we got to find ourselves in the space we got to find ourselves when we're going to those people. And so it's important that we understand Amos's ministry, what God was calling him to do. So here it is. We look at verse 24. Look at verse 24. He says, but let justice roll down like waters, righteousness like never failing stream. Now, some of that line might sound familiar a little bit to you because you remember Dr. Martin Luther King on that day, August 28, 1963, standing at Lincoln Memorial at the end of his I Have a Dream speech. He says, we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. In case you never knew, he was quoting Amos. Dr. King was quoting Amos in that line. And here it is. You got Amos, a shepherd boy, just doing what God has called him to do about 2,700 years before Dr. King gave this speech. And here it is. He used his same words to help lead and push a civil rights movement. What are you trying to tell me, Pastor? When you stand up for what's right, when you stand up for justice, it's not only for now, but it's also for tomorrow. And what we got to remind ourselves of is what I'm doing right now is not blessing me only, but it's also blessing my kids, and generations I haven't even met yet. So when we just stand up and do what's right, and just stand up for holiness and righteousness, people will be blessed many years beyond. Amos had no idea who Dr. King was. How could he? But here it is, 2,700 years later, approximately, here it is, Dr. King is using some of the same line that he used to tell Israel how wrong they were, and now look at us, we are the benefactors so many years later. That's right. So God can use whoever he wants to do. That's right. God can call whoever he wants to call. Come on. That's right. And greatness can come from what you do today. That's right. So what we got to do is just stand up for what's right. And here it is. Dr. King says this, and look what he says. And he talks about water. Amos talks about water. God uses this analogy, this imagery of water. What does water do? Water cleanses. It's almost as if he's saying justice will cleanse the society of its corruption if we stand for justice. What else does water do? Water refreshes. So justice will refresh those who are weary and who are tired. What else does water do? Water is essential for life. So when we stand up for justice and what's right, justice will be good for our community. What else does water do? Water finds its way through every barrier. So what are you trying to tell me? Justice won't be stopped. Come on now. There are people that's doing wrong stuff, and they might seem like they're thriving in wrong stuff today, but I'm going to tell you, justice will not be stopped. God is going to accomplish, he's going to finish, he's going to do exactly what he says he's going to do. We just got to keep standing up for what's right. So I notice it says, not a trickle, not a drip, not a leak, but he says, like rolling waters, a never failing stream. So this wasn't some kind of seasonal justice that shows up. Y'all know how people can all of a sudden have justice and righteousness in times of plenty or in political years. You know, midterms are coming up. So as midterms are coming up, people all of a sudden now want to stand up for what they perceive is right. And now they want to stand up and say, well, we stand for you, but what happens when it's not midterms? That's right. What happens in the other years? And so this wasn't a convenient justice that what they were speaking about. This was a justice for all people that's going to be overwhelming, unstoppable, unrelenting. And God says, I just need some folk to stand up for what's right. That's right. Yeah. So what do we do, Pastor? How do I make this practical? My Sunday worship and my Monday action need to align. Come on. Come on. That's right. How I worship on Sunday should also be a reflection of my actions on Monday. That's right. And on Tuesday. Yeah. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all the way through Saturday, Sunday, and do it all over again. Yes, sir. And so my praise, it also should produce practice. Right? It can't just be something I do because it's convenient, or a thing that we do when the organ hits a sound, or the keyboardist plays a certain sound, or sister such and such start running, and I know it's time to praise. No, it has to be practice. This is what I do. And my devotion, it is good on Sunday, but it should also lead to me, I should be demonstrating this in my everyday life. My prayer life should be reflective in everything I do throughout the week. And so we got practical things that we need to do. And so we have people, unfortunately, that can shout on Sunday, but then discriminate on Monday. How is it that we can talk about how good God is on Sunday and then treat people some kind of way on Monday? I just talked about Amos and him standing up for justice, because we're learning about the minor prophets. And I'm talking about in our lives how we can stand up for justice in our everyday life, our everyday lane, and our everyday arena. And some folk talk the part, but they don't walk the part. And some folk will speak in tongues on Sunday, but then use forked tongues at work. I'm in it already. Come on. Some people say, I'm going to lay on hands. Lay hands on folk one day, but then they ready to lay hands on people for real. Or talking crazy to them. That's right. Come on. I was just laying hands on somebody on Sunday. Justice. Somebody shout justice. God was telling Israel through the prophet Amos, I don't want your noise. I want your justice. Yeah. All that gathering that y'all are doing, all that talking that y'all are doing, all that shouting and worshiping y'all doing, you're doing it on Sunday, but you're doing wrong all through the week. Amen. So Sunday is just noise to me. It's not doing anything for me. And God was telling the Amos to tell the people, I'm not in what y'all are doing. He said to them, I hate it. I despise it. Your worship is worthless. Because you're wrong and how you're acting, how you're walking every single day. He says to them, I don't want your songs. I want your righteousness. I don't want your offerings. But I want you to be fair to people. So we all have an opportunity to stand up for what's right. When we see injustice, and we all will see it in our own way, in our own lane, and it looks different for each and every one of us, it's about what do we do next when we see it. How many of us are standing up for what's right? Or you see wrong happening? Stand up for what's right. Amen. Because we might not always be able to change the entire system, but I can stand up and say, well, look, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be on the side where I stood up for what was right. You might not like what I say, but I'm just trying to stand up for what's right. I'm trying to do what God has called me to do. Okay, I'm almost done. And then here's my last one, back in Amos 7 chapter. If you look at Amos 7 and you look at verses 10 through 17, we read some of this together. Here it is. Amos says, I'm going to speak truth to these powerful spaces. I'm coming in here to speak truth to these powerful spaces. So it continues to get interesting, the story does, because Amos has been preaching this message of justice we just tuned in, we're talking about Amos. We're talking about the minor prophets. We talked about Hosea last week, and we're talking about Amos this week, and we're learning about his work, because sometimes we can move past the minor prophets and talk about the major prophets, but we said it's summertime that we want to lean into some teaching and making sure we understand the totality of the text. Amos, he's here, and he's preaching about justice, and finally, the word reaches the ears of Amaziah, the priest at Bethel. Okay, so Amos been out talking to people, talking about how wrong y'all are. And now the word is starting to get upstream, and Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, hears it. And Amaziah does what some of the religious leaders do when power is threatened. Look what he does. He says, I'm about to run to the politicians. Here it is. He's the priest. And he says, I'm about to go tell the politicians on you. Come on now. I'm about to tell the government on you. So he sends a word to King Jeroboam, and he says to the king, hey, I need you to know something. Amos, hey, he's raising up a conspiracy about you and about Israel and about the work that we're doing here. And he's talking about Israel, and it's a conspiracy. And I'm telling you, the land cannot bear his words. That's what Amaziah said. Read it in your Bible study time. And so here it is. They called justice work that Amos was doing a conspiracy. What kind of time were they in, and what kind of time are we in, when people are standing up for righteousness and holiness, and they're calling it justice work, the work of the Lord that God had called Amos to do? They were calling it conspiracy. He was speaking truth, and they were calling it treason. and we can find things happening in our similar time. And so Amaziah, if you read 10 and 17, we don't have the time, but let me just get through it as quick as I can. He confronts Amos, and he goes to him directly, and he says to him, get out, he says, you seer, go back to the land of Judah. Then he says, earn your bread there and do your prophesying there. Don't prophesy anymore at Bethel, because this is the king's sanctuary and the temple of his kingdom. Oh, this is good. And he says, go back to Judah. Don't get out of here. Go back to where you came. All right, listen. And go earn your bread there prophesying. Then he says, don't prophesy no more here. We don't want to hear this no more. Your word ain't sounding good to us. We don't like what you're preaching. Y'all, that might sound interesting, because some people are on social media right now, and when they're hearing something that they don't like, guess what they do? They just swipe. When you hear a word that starts to convict you, now what some folk do is they just swipe. But when you decide, I'm going to sit under teaching, and I'm going to be discipled, and I'm going to grow in Christ, you can also, watch this, you can eat the food that you like. You can eat your desserts or your steaks or whatever you like, but you got to eat your veggies too. Yeah, you got to have a balanced meal. That's right. You can't just only eat one side, but you got to have a balanced meal. You might not like the beets, the Brussels sprouts, the broccoli, the asparagus, or that might be your thing, but some folks that I just cannot stand it. But you know, although I don't like how it tastes, you know it's good for me. And we have to make sure we never deviate from that space, that we're only listening to what's comfortable to us. We're only listening to what sounds good to us. And what was happening at this time, that they were saying, look, we don't like your preaching, so stop preaching. Go somewhere else and preach that. And so he did the work of the Lord. He kept preaching. But look what he says. Did you catch it? He says, this is the king's sanctuary, the temple of his kingdom. The king's sanctuary. I thought it was God's church. I thought this is God's kingdom. I thought we're doing the work of the Lord. The text tells us to work as unto the Lord. I thought everything we've done and we continue to do is for the Lord. But he's saying this is the king's sanctuary. And this is his kingdom. They got it twisted. And we find ourselves in trouble when we start trying to own what's God's. Because everything that we have belongs to him. There's not one thing we got that belongs to us. The text says, the earth is the Lord the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. The God that I serve, he sits high, and he looks low. The God that I serve, he owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. It all belongs to him. It's not mine. It's not yours. It's his. The house that I got is his. The food in my refrigerator, that's his too. The clothes on my back, that's his too. And I wouldn't have it if he wouldn't be kind enough to let me get it. And sometimes, I know, we got to have those reminder moments. Because we can get caught up in ourselves. And this is what was happening with Israel. They got caught up in themselves. Things were going very well for them. And y'all know how it is when things are going well, people can start to forget about God. They start backing away and they start doing their own thing because now I'm good now. And God says, don't get it twisted. This is mine. Everything you have is mine. And that's the beauty of us always being in good relationship with God and understanding no matter whether I have a lot or a little, it all belongs to him. And I'm going to honor God with all of it. And if I keep honoring him, he's going to honor me. But they had it twisted right here. He said this is the king's sanctuary, the temple of the kingdom. And that's when religion becomes the possession of the politicians. Yeah, at that time, and it started to